Yes. Okay, we're going to reconvene the meeting. So right now, on the floor, is a budget that stands at $272,282,694,000, which represents a decrease from the Board of Finance amount of $1,061,000 and an increase from last year of $9,208,752 and a 3.5% increase. That is where we stand, and I have Representative Garskoff, who is raising his hand.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Josh Garskoff, District 5. I would ask for a reconsideration of the $850,000 cut to the contingency based on the comments that we heard from our Chief Financial Officer saying it was financial suicide, and the Chairman of our Board of Finance saying it was fiscally irresponsible. I did not vote with that, so I can't make that. I can't put that forward, but I would ask someone who did vote with that to put that forward. And barring that, at least to put forward a reconsideration of the $250 that was cut from Board of Ed, which also I didn't vote in favor of, so I also can't open that up. But I would request that at the very least, in the same way that the lawnmower cost was put back in, that would be put back in too. Thank you.
Representative Ambrose. Matt. Junior. No.
How you doing? I just wanted to talk real quick about the $850,000 cut. I used to sell municipal bonds in Greenwich, and I know that one of the things that investors who pretty much dictate what rates we pay on our debt really look for, I guess, the town's financial flexibility. And they're going to notice that we don't have the reserves that Moody's and S&P already said that they'd like to see. Also, and probably even more important, Moody's, S&P, the rating agencies, they're going to look at our budget again, I think in June. And they're going to notice an $850,000 just went missing. They're going to consider that again when they re-rate us, and I don't know, they're going to probably think that we're playing games or really doesn't matter, but it's one of those things that they're probably not going to trust us, or it just, we've heard from Mr. Hiller, we've heard from Mr. Flynn, and they both spoke to the fact that it would be financial suicide, and we'd end up paying a lot more on our debt if we're paying on a AA rated bond as opposed to a AAA. I just really like us to reconsider that, and maybe you guys can tell this is my first time speaking. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other members? Representative Dean.
Representative Dean, District 4. Frankly, I'm a little disappointed that we would cut in our contingency fund after getting the good news that Moody had upgraded us to stable rather than negative. And that's the drumbeat for the past 2 years, that we had been negative for too long. And I was rather excited that with the management that we have in place that we were able to change that. Mr. Tetreault took time to explain to me about the contingency, and in basic plain terms, this is our savings account. This is our rainy day fund. And I voted against cutting it, and I still feel the same way, that this is our rainy day fund. I can't make it any more plain than that. We have all tightened our belts. We've all cut our expenses with the goal to put money into our savings account so we had it as a backup. I'm hopeful that someone, any member of this body that voted to cut it would reconsider it And I support Josh's point of reconsidering the Board of Ed cut as well. Thank you.
Representative Schwartz.
Hal Schwartz, District 7. I'm still sitting in a little bit of shock. I'm really almost speechless. We sat here last night for well over an hour. We talked about fiscal responsibility. We talked about the taxpayers. We talked about giving them back something that they deserve. Instead, we don't make a budgetary decision. This body makes a political decision. The majority caucus decides that we can't cut line items to the budget, but we can cut one line item to the budget. We can put the town in financial jeopardy, but that's okay because we can. So I again would call for a motion to reconsider. The Board of Finance members who've been here for 2 nights, we voted yes, they got up and they walked out. That tells you where they are with this decision. We're going to be sitting here 4-6 months from now, and the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen are going to ask us to be moving money back out of the surplus to pay for the money that we took out of here now. It's a bad decision. It's a bad time. Moody's is 30 days away. Beware. Thank you.
Representative DiMartino. There's a motion to call the question. Is there a second? Representative Ryan. This is not debatable and not amendable. So now we're going to go to a vote to call the question, which is going to bring the budget up for a final vote. I'm going to just do a roll call because it's going to be easier. We need a 2/3 vote here. If you're voting yes, that means the budget vote is then before us in its newly amended number, which I will read again. So saying yes means we're going straight to a vote on the budget. Voting no means you want further discussion.
Dave Becker? No. Mike Hurley? No. Gaylord Meyer? Carolyn Richmond? Yes. Eric Sunman? No. Pete Ambrose? No. John Matola? No. Jeff Steele?
Yes.
Keith Varian? Where is he? Thank you. You have to speak up. We're in a cavern. Ed Bateson? Tom Conley? Hank Ferentz? Dave McKenzie? Mary McCullough? Heather Dean? Joe DiMartino? Art Hugg? Amy Mezoff? Joe Palmer? Matt Ambrose? Josh Garskoff? Chris McAleese? Ruth Smay? Ann Stamler? Chris Brogan? Lenora Campbell? Julie Gottlieb? Sheila Marmion? Jay Walk? Jen Hochberg? Kevin Hopkins? Eric Newman? Mark Patton? Hal Schwartz? Kathy Braun? Dana Carey? Tom McCarthy? Bill D'Amica? Joe Fellner? Ellen Jacob? Nick Maraboli? Carol Pontrelli? Lee Hannum? Ken Lee? Bruce Ryan? Carol Way? Dave Weber?
All right, the motion fails 938, so we're still back to discussing the budget as amended. Representative Hopkins.
Kevin Hopkins, District 7. Finding it very, very hard to vote for this budget because it's been described as fiscal suicide for our town. The cut that was made tonight was completely irresponsible. But then I know that, unfortunately, we do need a budget. So I guess in politics you have to understand that you have to just sometimes swallow hard and do what you don't like to do. Because unfortunately, the only thing that's more irresponsible than voting for the $850,000 cut would be to vote against this budget and then leave our town without a budget. Thank you.
Representative Bateson.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ed Bates in District 3. Through you to the town attorney or whoever can answer, if the budget gets voted down, what happens?
Mr. Lesser.
I was asked that question earlier today, and I've had some discussions with your moderator. It's kind of uncharted waters, quite frankly. There are a couple of statutes that pertain to this. I think that the first thing that happens, that anything that happens tonight is obviously subject to referendum. But that being said, if no budget gets passed, there's a statute that allows the Board of Selectmen to get together and basically set the mill rate. That would have to happen after July 1st, when you're actually in the tax year that you're talking about, in the fiscal year. The statute provides that if there's been no appropriation made, that the Board of Selectmen can get together, and there are two cases that I found in the state that deal with this, and they both deal with situations where you have a town meeting budget as opposed to a representative town meeting budget. And what it says is, in one case, the Board of Selectmen got together, they took the estimates of expenditures and expenses and revenue that were set by the Board of Finance, and they levied the mill rate. And they set the mill rate for the town, and they taxed the town. So basically, there are also provisions that if there's no budget, there are provisions for the Board of Finance to be making expenditures. The statutes talk about interim expenditures because I don't think they contemplate that no budget will ever be passed. And the two cases, like I said, that talked about it involve town meeting, where you keep getting, the budget gets changed and the town votes it down and it gets changed and you vote it down again. But ultimately, in both those cases, the budget was passed. So again, it's kind of uncharted waters, but the short answer, in a long way, is that the Board of Selectmen would set the mill rate after July 1st. But that, I suppose, raises a lot of other issues.
Okay, just some clarification. In previous years, I remember asking this question every time we go to the budget, and my impression always was that we come back tomorrow night because you have to have a budget. I mean, I guess, Mr. First Selectman, I mean, who would be in charge of that process? It would...
Well, you know, we Mr. Steele and I have talked about this. I don't see anything that says that you come back tomorrow night, okay? You have, if the RTM leaves here tonight, having passed the resolution on the budget, the next step, I believe, would be someone could pull a petition on a referendum. You don't come back tomorrow night.
Okay, thank you.
But again, you know, I don't think that's ever happened before, and I haven't seen any cases where it's been dealt with.
I mean, certainly it is not defined and not clear what we would do. I think there's an initial opinion. If this were to happen, we're going to have to cross that bridge. There's certainly a debate on whether or not a referendum would be entailed if there's actually a vote that fails, because usually a referendum is based on a vote that passes, would be my understanding, but I'm not a lawyer. So I guess we would have to cross that bridge when we get to it, if we get to it. So, Yes, Representative Lee?
Ken Lee, District 10. I was just reflecting on how I got to be sitting in that chair. A year ago, I came, can you hear me? Oh, I'm sorry. A year ago, I came to this same budget discussion to observe as a citizen. And I recall a spreadsheet of cuts being handed out, and when the person who was handing out that spreadsheet informed the body that there were only enough copies for the Republicans. And when asked what the Democrats should do, the reply was sit next to a Republican and look over their shoulder. I thought that was inappropriate. And the more I thought about it, the more I was upset. And that's how I ended up running for the RTM. Never in my wildest dreams did I think I'd get this much entertainment, to be honest with you. My personal budget is pretty easy to do because I don't have much money and I have kids. So at the beginning of the year, I take an estimate of what I'm going to make, and I make some decisions about what we can have and what we can't have. 10 days ago, my son broke a tooth. That wasn't in my budget. If I did my budget like we're about to do this budget, he'd have to wait till next year to get his tooth fixed, or would have to take, 5 weeks off from eating. That's kind of the way that I'm looking at this thing. I would consider a cut from pretty much anything that made sense, but a cut from the thing that saves you from disaster doesn't seem to fit into that category. I don't anticipate anyone getting up and making a motion to reconsider. I think that decision has already been made for me, and I don't have the ability to do that. And that's okay, because that's politics, and that's pretty much what we're doing here. But I can't help but wonder if the reason we're doing it that way is that when they got the list of items from the department heads, of things that they, not things that they could do without, mind you, but the things that they could, if they had to give it up, this would be their first choice to give up reluctantly. They didn't find $800,000. I really think that's the bottom line. And I find that very disappointing, that we would, instead of finding something somewhere that's reasonable, or just simply passing the budget, we would instead put ourselves in jeopardy. We're here looking at a proposed $10 million budget because systematically, over the last probably 8 or 9 years, I don't know, I wasn't here, but I read pretty well, our budget has been systematically underfunded. Pension, insurance funds, lots of things. Now, we can either fix that or we cannot fix it. Moody's report that we all got said, basically, you're doing a good job. You're putting the money in there that you need to put in there. When they look at it the next time, they're going to say, oh, you changed your mind? So do we. And so all that work that we did goes away. And the next time we go to them, what are they going to think? We're going to have a good story, but are they going to believe that we're really going to follow through? So it's more even than a budget here. It's our own credibility as a town. Now, I am empathetic to all those who want to see less taxes. I am not well-to-do, and I struggle to make ends meet every month. I live month to month. That's just where I'm at. I'm not the only one. There's a lot of, upper-level people who have lost jobs. I get all that. But our responsibility is to the 60,000 people in our town. And our primary responsibility is to keep them safe. And we just undid that. So I can't support the budget, and that's okay. But I can't let it go unspoken without putting my feelings out there, because that's why I ran. Thank you.
Representative Conley.
Tom Conley, District 3. I did not vote for the $850,000 cut. I would ask the Republic. I said I did not vote for the $850,000 cut. I believe that we should reconsider. I can't offer that as a motion because I did not vote for it. I have to tell everybody that I do not want to put the town in fiscal risk. I trust Mr. Hiller and Mr. Flynn, and I would urge the Republicans to get up and also make that reconsideration. If they, again, I can't make anybody do it, I would offer that to you, and I would offer also that, in fact, we go back and line by line and extract $850,000 from departments. Thank you.
Representative Wall.
Jay Wolf, District 7, different District 6. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I just want to say to each and every one of everybody in this body that I respect each and every one of you, and that I'm proud to serve on this body. So that said, I ask my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to reconsider this cut. I've heard numerous times that we have so much debt in this town and that we need to pay back our debt. If we lose our AAA bond rating, in my opinion, it's going to add to the debt. Interest rates are going to go up on bonding. What we're bonding now on capital improvements, we're not going to have the same interest rate. So my question is, why would you leave the town at jeopardy? And I hope you can reconsider this cut. Thank you.
Representative Mottola.
John Mottola, District 2. I probably should have asked this question before I spoke last time I was up here. Through you, Mr. Steele. Mr. Hiller, can I ask you a question about what happens after July 1st? If a budget is passed and whatever the amount is, does the Board of Finance have the authority, if the Board of Finance feels that this cut from the contingency can't stand, does the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen have the authority to take money from certain departments to add to that contingency fund, if you know?
In part, I will echo some of Attorney Lesser's words earlier, that we're in uncharted waters. The Board of Finance, first off, under state statute, there's a requirement that any funds taken out of the contingency account require approval of the full process through the Board of Finance and the RTM. So the remaining money is roughly, Mrs. Gardner can tell me better, the $238,000 or whatever remains in there. The $238,000 that remains in the proposed contingency account, any funds taken out of that account would require Board of Finance and RTM approval, along with recommendation from the Board of Selectmen initially. My understanding is that any other funds would be, as far as transfers, would be at the discretion of the Board of Finance.
Okay. So they, theoretically, if they felt it necessary to take some money from Public Works to add to the contingency after July, I'm sorry, theoretically, if the Board of Finance felt it was the fiscal responsible thing to do, to take money, for example, from Public Works and put it into the contingency fund, they have the authority to do that. That's at least your understanding?
That is correct.
Okay.
Under state statute,
All right.
which would prevail.
I mean, that wasn't it's hard for me to vote for a budget that the chief fiscal officer and the Board of Finance representatives indicated that it's fiscally irresponsible. But on the other side of the coin, we do need to pass a budget. So I'm just very disappointed on the cut to the contingency fund. I think it was the absolutely wrong thing to do. And, you know, I was willing to go through the department line by line to see where we could effectuate some savings, but unfortunately, it doesn't look like that's going to happen. But we do need a budget. So reluctantly, I'll probably support the budget. Thank you, Mr. Hiller. Thank you, Mr. Steele.
Representative Ryan.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Representative Ryan from District 10. First, I want to make one point real clear to anyone who's not got this message over the last 2 days. This budget is being increased, or was proposed to be increased, by over $10 million from last year, in an economy that is not going north, to say the least. Secondly, the proposals that have been passed for this budget, or we have passed so far, represent a $1.1 million decrease to the $10 million increase, or a net increase to the town and the Board of Ed of $9 million at the taxpayer's expense. Make that clear, all of you. This is ludicrous that in a $270 million budget, we can't find $1 million cut. Mr. Hiller just said that with the contingency, but on the contingency, that the ability for the Board of Finance, and I suspect, I'm not a politician, don't know anything about politics, but through the first selectman, there would be room for him to attach the departments to make up that $1 million. What is $1 million on a $273 million budget? What is the math? 1/4%? 1/4%. Please. Anyone who doesn't see the reality here, the numbers, is living in total la-la land. We need to... I don't want to pass this budget, frankly, because there's not enough cut. But, and to the issue that was brought up by, I think, Mr. Schwartz, that the majority, and that we manipulated this as the majority caucus to do a line item cut. At every turn in the last 2 days, we were thwarted by the town's attorney. We always wanted to have a budget department by department, where the people who ran those departments certainly know better than the 50 of us where they can cut. And that's the way it's done in the real world. It's not done that way in the town. It's about time the town woke up and started operating in the real world. Thank you.
Representative Patton.
Mark Patton, District 7. 231. That's the number of emails that we discussed back and forth, and how many emails we all got, and give or take, you know, ones that you may or not have gotten from directly from your constituents in your own district. That's about what we got. Roughly 52 in my case were negative. They all said they want 0% cuts, they want to support the 2% across the board cut, they wanted budget cuts. 177 said no cuts. Don't cut the library, don't cut the museums, don't cut the Board of Ed. Those things are moot now. But what those people and the other 59,000 people of this town did is they elected us to do a job. The Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance did their job to create the budget, to make cuts where they could, to keep things flat where they could. As we all know, the $10 million, $5 or $6 million of that is in things like debt service and contingency and pension. Okay, it's not about items in the budget. So then it comes to us to make the hard decisions. And just because we don't like the rules of how the budget is supposed to be cut, which is our job, to pass it, make cuts where necessary, shenanigans ensue. You could call it, some people are saying it's politics. Some people are saying it's passing the buck. I say it's irresponsible. I don't care what party you're from. I don't care what part of town you live in. It's irresponsible to take and make a cut in the one area that we all know is one of the dumbest areas in the entire budget to cut. Do the work. You want to cut $20,000 here and $500 there? We're here. I told my wife I wouldn't be home till 3 in the morning because I was pretty sure that that was the minimum it was going to take to get all the line items cut that were possibly suggested. And that's not the case here. It's not why I was elected. It's not what the people elected any of us to do. They elected us to do their job, do our job. Despite what we think of the rules, it's not how the world works. Nobody gets to make up the rules in big business, in town government, in federal government, in life. You don't get to change the rules. You want to change the rules? Become a legislator. That's what we are starting out here. I'm not in favor of passing a budget that's this irresponsible. I'm just not.
Representative Becker?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. David Becker, District 1. Quite frankly, it appears that there are no rules because at every turn, the goalposts change. We found that all the way through this budget process. And it's, quite frankly, that's irresponsible. This body needs to understand from the very beginning what the processes are. We don't need consistently competing opinions from the same set of attorneys. It's been a real problem for this body. So we talk about line items, we talk about percentages, we talk about departments. I'm not sure anyone on this body actually knows what the real procedure is. And there's obviously so much vagueness that maybe at this stage we talk about charter reform. It's been brought up in the past. That authority rests with the first selectman. Hopefully we'll take that up. Maybe we'll do it before next year. But this body has a real problem when it comes to the rules. Not because we don't want to follow the rules, but because those goalposts are consistently changed on us. I also want to talk about something else that's irresponsible. What's irresponsible is that if your house is assessed, and this is an assessed value, your appraised value would be 30% higher than this number, but if your assessed value is $300,000, you'd be paying approximately $6,700 in taxes. In 10 years, you're paying just shy of $11,000. If your house is assessed at $600,000, right now you're looking at approximately $13,500. That shoots up in 10 years to just shy of $18,000. That's what's irresponsible. It's irresponsible. We talk about all these lines. We talk about departments. There's so many different ways we can go about this budget, but this is essentially the third year in a row that the only people that have gotten up is Republicans. I thought that this body wasn't just Republicans and Democrats, but it was an RTM, and that more proposals would be brought forward. And again, the legal opinion only makes matters worse for this entire body. There's a total level of uncertainty. But I do want to talk about this contingency. Obviously, it's created quite a bit of controversy. I want to lay out a sheet that was sent, budget projections through year end as of March 28th. This would be, talk about vacancies. Right now, there will be, this is an estimate, I'll give them that, but this is $670,000 worth of vacancies is currently being projected throughout all of the town side of the budget, which is what we're talking about here. They range from DPW at $250,000. They range from DPW at $250,000. Library, $100,000. Emergency Communications Center at $50,000. Town Plan and Zone is at $50,000. Assessor, $50,000. Health, $50,000. Human Resources, $50,000. Engineering, $25,000. Smith Richardson, $20,000. Tax Collector, $15,000. And Purchasing, $10,000. That adds up to $670,000 that has been found through one way or another this year in the budget and is going to contribute towards that surplus. These are the types of things that I'm talking about as to why $850,000 can be absorbed. I'd also like to speak about some expenses. Absolutely. $175,000 on the legal side. There's a variety of other expenses. There's also some more savings that were found. That rests, it's settled up by the Board of Selectmen at the end of the year, but that authority throughout the year seems to rest with the first selectman, which is why I believe that if we follow what we have been doing for the last few years, if the administration does what the previous administration did into this next year and manages down savings just like that and so many others, and there's been such a conversation, looking at those 2% proposals from the department heads, that created an amazing conversation in this town. Looking last night at a packed auditorium, all the emails, the amount of people I'm sure that went up on the town's website and reviewed those proposals. And if they haven't, I hope everybody does, should look at that and should start the conversation and should start looking at, are there areas throughout the year that we can save money? We're settling this budget up in part because of that uncertainty regarding the legal position. We're also settling the budget up at this stage because this is the beginning of the conversation, and I believe that if this budget is passed today, that starting tomorrow, this entire RTM, maybe there's a subcommittee, maybe it's a committee that we already have that holds a meeting and holds a series of meetings with the other boards and the administration, and Dr. Tito has proposed, when I laid that out yesterday, to look for these savings. You know, if we find them now, we can use them in this year. Just like, as an example, the 670. And I understand that this year, 1.55 million also included a debt service refinancing, but that's not the case in all of these years. I go back, and again, in year ended 2009, let's see, we've got year ended, start with 11. So we're going to roll backwards. We've got 1.5 is the estimate for fiscal 12. We've got 1.6 is the actual for fiscal 11. And as I stated, you actually go back to fiscal 10. That'd be the year where we had $2.1 million through these types of savings. So unless that's not going to happen this next year, and I would note in some of these years we had exactly those hurricanes or really tropical storms and series of snowstorms, many other things throughout there, run-ups because of legal expenses, other things like that, and we've settled this budget up at the end with massive surpluses. And when you do that, you don't end up in the position of, I believe it was called fiscal suicide or something along those lines. I think everyone needs to temper back some of these comments, needs to think about it, needs to look at the numbers that are before us, real numbers that are before us, and need to think about where we stand. And quite frankly, I am going to vote for this budget. I would love to see so many things. I've spoken about this in the past. But again, the conversation starts tomorrow as to how we move forward, and I believe that this body will need to work in doing that, and I believe that this is a very conservative overall number coming down from this budget, And I believe that I've laid out a case for why it is that we're going to be able to do that. It's a lot of work. This is going to be hard work, just like I'm sure it was for Mr. Tetro to get to these numbers, and for Mr. Flato to get to two even bigger numbers in those years. And there's a lot of factors to move on. These are big budgets, and that's what we need to do. That's why I say we need to manage down to it. Thank you.
Representative Marmion.
Sheila Marmion, District 6. I think we're effectively ending the conversation that we started, and that upsets me to no end. I was prepared last week after hearing about the 2%, the proposed 2% cut. I stood up here and I said, you know, I'm concerned. I need to understand from each of the department heads the impact on services that these proposed cuts will have. That's called having a conversation. That's what I thought we were going to engage in. And I was prepared tonight to have a conversation with department heads. I think that is our responsibility, to hear from the department heads who are charged with managing their budgets and charged with delivering services, the impact that the cuts would have. It's not just us that needs to have that conversation. We need to have an open dialogue so that the entire town, the residents of this town, can understand what the impact of those cuts would be. By cutting the contingency fund, basically the people who supported that cut are passing the buck. You are abdicating your responsibility. I don't feel comfortable abdicating that responsibility and ending that conversation. I cannot support this budget when it puts our town at financial risk. Frankly, so much has been said about people are going to leave town. They can't afford to live here. That's a real concern. But by putting our town, our AAA rating at risk, I can only imagine what's going to happen to our town in terms of people being able to stay and people being forced to leave. Thank you.
Representative Schwartz.
Hal Schwartz, District 7. I just want to remind this body that the RTM is a legislative body. We have a person who was elected to run the town. The people of this town elected our first selectman. That's his job. It's his job to run the town. It's our job to legislate. It doesn't mean we tell them where to spend the money or how. We just give them the money and let them spend it. Okay, it is our responsibility, if we feel it's necessary, to cut it by line item. It has been done that way in the past. This is my 9th budget. This budget has always been cut for line items. 2:30, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning. This is what we do. Everybody comes in and be prepared. You can sit here and say it's time to start a conversation, but you know what? It's not our job. It's not what we're here for. Somebody was elected to do that. There's 3 people that do that, and that's what they were elected to do. There's a Board of Finance that was elected to do that. That's why it's a separation of power, okay? Legislation means legislate. It does not mean financial responsibility or to tell people where and how to spend the money. I think this body needs to get back to legislating and let the people who are elected to run the town. Thank you.
Representative DiMartino. Representative Becker. The request to call caucus, 10 minutes by the Majority Leader. We're having a recess. So I'm going to resume the meeting now and just remind everyone that, as in, I'll use the metaphor of football, each caucus has burned its time out. So no more recess, no more caucuses. Just want to remind everyone. I know everyone wants to have one. So we are going to resume where we were before, and that is the budget as amended is on the floor, and it's with the body. Representative DiMartino. The motion on the floor is to call the question. The second is Representative Ryan. Non-debatable, non-amendable. We need a 2/3 vote to, again, the vote, to say yes means we're going straight to a vote on the budget, which will be an up or down vote, bypassing further discussion, we go straight to the vote. So by saying yes, that means we're going straight to the vote. I'm going to do a roll call.
David Becker? Mike Hurley? Gaylord Meyer? Carolyn Richmond? Eric Sunman? Pete Ambrose? John Matola? Jeff Steele?
Yes.
Keith Varian? Ed Bateson? Tom Conley? Hank Ferentz? Dave McKenzie? Mary McCullough? Heather Dean? Joe DiMartino? Art Hug? Amy Mezoff? Joe Palmer? Matt Ambrose? Josh Garskoff? Chris McAleese? Ruth Smay? Ann Stamler? Chris Brogan? Lenora Campbell? Julie Gottlieb? Sheila Marmion? Jay Walk? Jen Hochberg? Kevin Hopkins? Eric Newman? Mark Patton? Hal Schwartz? Kathy Braun? Dana Carey? Tom McCarthy? Bill D'Amica? Joe Fellner? Ellen Jacob? Nick Morably? Carol Pontrelli? Lee Hannum? Ken Lee? Bruce Ryan? Carol Way? Dave Weber?
The motion passes 38-9. So before us, we have the final budget numbers. I'm not going to read the entire item number 2, but I will read the numbers, and Linda, if you can listen up and make sure I'm correct. So basically, this is the total proposed budget, gross budget of $272,282,694, less estimated receipts of $25,626,101, net budget of $246,656,593, plus reserve for uncollected taxes of $4,229,790. Amount to be raised by taxation is $250,886,383. Is that correct? Yes? Okay. So we are now going to vote on this number. We're going to do a roll call to say yes, because you support the numbers I just read. To say no is to not support them, and abstentions we know.
Dave Becker? Mike Hurley? Gaylord Meyer? Carolyn Richmond? Eric Sunman? Was it a yes or a pass? Thank you. Pete Ambrose? John Matola? Jeff Steele?
Yes.
Keith Varian? Ed Bateson? Tom Conley? Hank Ferentz? Dave McKenzie? Mary McCullough? Heather Dean? Joe DiMartino? Art Hug? Amy Mezoff? Joe Palmer? Matt Ambrose? Josh Garskoff? Chris McAleese? Ruth Smay? Ann Stamler? Chris Brogan? Lenora Campbell? Julie Gottlieb? Sheila Marmion? Excuse me? Thank you. Jay Walk? Jen Hochberg? Kevin Hopkins? Eric Newman? Mark Patton? Hal Schwartz? Kathy Braun? Dana Carey? Tom McCarthy? Bill D'Amica? Joe Fellner? Ellen Jacob? Nick Marabli? Carol Pontrelli? Lee Hannum? Ken Lee? Bruce Ryan? Carol Way? Dave Weber? Joe DiMartino? Chris McAleese? Chris Brogan? Lenore Campbell? Julie Gottlieb? Jen Hochberg?
Budget passes 34-13. We have one more item for the night. Is that motion? Item number 3, to consider and act upon the self-supporting funds in the amount of $5,036,356 for the Water Pollution Control Authority for the fiscal year of July 1st, 2012 through June 30th, 2013. This was referred to all standing committees. May I have a motion to approve? Representative Lee, second Representative Hopkins. Discussion from the body? Hearing none. All those in favor of this item say aye. Aye. All those opposed, raise your hand. Abstentions? Motion passes. Final item, number 5, to consider and act upon any other matters presented at said meeting which may be properly acted upon under the rules of the representative town meeting. There are none. Motion to adjourn by Representative Schwartz, second by Representative Dean. All those in favor? All those opposed? Abstentions? Mr. Petro? You're right. He raised his hand. By the way, just so everybody knows, the next meeting is May 21st at the Board of Ed building. Next week there are committee meetings on Monday and Wednesday, and the call will be out this week. Thank you, everybody. What's that?